Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Nearly 7 months into the fiscal year, the Small Business Administration is considering moving the small business contracting goalposts for agencies. In a document sent to agencies in March, SBA detailed several new factors it will consider as it grades agency efforts to contract with small businesses. For more on this new methodology and why SBA's plans are causing concern among small business experts and on Capitol Hill, Federal News Network's executive editor Jason Miller joins me now. Jason, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Terry.
Well, this is always a surprise when the goalposts get moved in the middle of the game. What exactly is SBA proposing to the small business scorecard methodology?
There's several major changes to the way they grade agencies. Now, the small business scorecard is something that's been coming out every year for many, many years. The most recent scorecard came out. We're looking at the 2024 data, so we're still waiting on the 2025. But what SBA is basically proposing here is they're going to focus on more veteran-owned businesses, both service-disabled veteran-owned business and non-service disabled. They want fewer sole-source 8A contracts. No surprise there. There's been an ongoing focus on the 8A program and reducing the number of sole-source awards. They're actually changing the name of one of the categories. They're now going to call the small disadvantaged business category the economically disadvantaged category. They will both include SDBs, small disadvantaged businesses, and as well as veteran-owned firms. They also are going to grade agencies on how well they're partnering with SBA to root out fraud across small business programs and how the agency is providing, and I'm using quotes here, Terry, competitive value to the taxpayer. There is no definition of what that means. Now, what SBA says in this memo which Federal News Network obtained is basically veterans have sacrificed their lives, earned special considerations, including in federal contracting. They do face some economic challenges when they return home from overseas. That limits their ability to access capital and start and grow small businesses. And they want to prioritize in procurement goaling how agencies work with and focus on their contracting and the goaling to these veteran-owned businesses. The other thing that SBA is doing, which is very interesting, is when you break down the percentage value for each of these categories. Terry, I'm not much in math. You know that. I'm a writer because I don't do math, but this math does not work because when you add them all up, it's 50% for prime contracts. Do the math with me. Subcontract awards get 25%, so 75%. Serving veterans, 15%. So now we're at 90%. Providing competitive value to the taxpayer, 10%. So there's our 100%. But we have one more. Partnering with SBA to reduce fraud, another 10%. So the percentages equal 110%. Now, Terry, you and I know sports a little bit probably. We can always give 110% on the field. I'm not sure how you give 110% when it comes to contracting. But that's what SBA is asking agencies to do, and they don't really explain how this works. Now, real quick, Terry, let me compare it to what the scorecard methodology had looked like for the past dozen years or so. Prime contracting, 50%. Subcontracting, 20%. Comparison of the number of small business prime contractors in each of the 5 categories around socioeconomic. So 8A, SDB is one, Hub Zone, veteran-owned, women-owned business as the other ones, 10%. And then the work of the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization Office to comply with the Small Business Act, roughly 21 requirements, that was 20%. So there's 100%. So, Terry, there's a lot here. We will have a link. Make sure folks can read the memo on federalnewsnetwork.com.
Jason, maybe the 10% is an extra bonus. I don't know how they'll do the math, but it did come out in a memo, so that sounds pretty formal and official. Is it a done deal, or do you think this is really just more of a proposal?
It's really hard to say. I've been reaching out to SBA over the last month, multiple emails, both to the press office and to their main press secretary, and I just have received nothing back from them. Now, I have been told from sources that SBA did confirm that this is a done deal to folks on Capitol Hill, but even from Capitol Hill, they're not sure what's going on. So will it happen? It's just hard to say. I even reached out to a small business program director at one big agency, and even they declined to comment, saying, well, it's still in discussions, or, well, I'm not sure it's final. So I think there's a lot of questions that still remain over whether this is a proposal or this is a done deal.
Have you been able to get a hold of folks in the small business community to hear what they're thinking about it?
Absolutely. And there's a little bit mixed. Some are very concerned. Some are, hey, the scorecard never really matters anyways. But let me talk a little bit about the folks who are really concerned. Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, who's the ranking member of the Small Business Committee, actually wrote a letter to SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler on April 1st, seeking answers to 34 different questions and data that the agency uses to support its decision. Basically, Velázquez said, what is going on here? We don't understand. How is this not going to hurt small businesses? And so some of the questions she asked was, what circumstance triggered SBA to rewrite the grade calculation methodology and lower federal agency contracting targets midway through the fiscal year? What is the rationale for changing the total performance score from 100% to 110%? Was there consideration given to how artificially raising the total performance to 110% would dilute the value of the statutorily required criteria, including the value of contract obligations? Other questions she asked was, what changes have been made to federal IT systems that track small businesses, SBA certification, small business prime subcontract obligations? All of that matters to how agencies can confirm that they've met or exceeded these goals. Now, Velázquez asked for answers by April 15th. I'm still waiting to hear back from SBA or the Congresswoman to see if the agency did respond or not. I've also reached out to other leaders on Capitol Hill, the Chairwoman, Joni Ernst, and the ranking member, Ed Markey, of the Senate Small Business Committee. They have not responded yet. And, of course, Roger Williams, the chairman of the House Small Business Committee, their folks have not responded yet either. As far as other folks, small business experts, I also spoke with George Price. George Price is a former State Department director of their OSDBU, Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. And he is stunned by these changes, especially given, as he says, the proven and positive track record of federal awards to small businesses it has on the economy. George Price believes that this change in methodology will potentially increase the acquisition workforce's workload. It could drive consolidation and bundling and greater use of existing government-wide contracts. You know, what he says doesn't really increase the resources or tools available for agencies to manage this acquisition workload. So, Terry, there's a lot of concern across the board about what this change would mean.
Jason, you said at the beginning of the small business communities contracts that some people think it doesn't really matter, that the scorecard doesn't really change behavior. What does the data tell us?
Well, Sam Lee, a former SBA associate administrator in the Office of Government Contracting and Business Development Office, really kind of downplayed the importance of the goaling factors. He goes, listen, agencies are focused on numerical goals. Those numerical goals are like, am I reaching 25% or 30% or whatever their goals are to award to small firms? He said the grades, not so important. Yeah, it's nice to get an A, right? We all in school want to get the A or rather than the B. But generally speaking, it's really based on, are you meeting those percentage goals that you're out to? Are you awarding the contract? And in fact, Lee wrote on a post on Substack that GAO found similar in a 2018 report that says changing the scorecard methodology had little impact on small business procurement opportunities. In fact, what GAO did find was things like category management, which again, another popular thing across the government, actually impact agencies and in terms of how they meet small business goals more than whether or not the methodology has changed. But at the same time, Lee says, listen, the SBA has not updated the scorecard methodology in at least a decade. And yes, there are some constraints from a statutory perspective, but the administrator has the authority to update the success measures as they deem appropriate. And obviously, this is some of these factors are recognizing and supporting what the administration and Administrator Loeffler have in mind. You've heard this, you've seen this from Republicans and the administration around the fraud, waste, and abuse issues and the concerns about sole source contracts.
It sounds like this is, if nothing else, at least a clear message about those priorities.
Terry, I think that's absolutely fair to say. I think one of the things that the administration is sending, and whether or not this becomes permanent or not, or whether or not they eventually say, fine, we'll start in 2027 with these factors, they're really trying to say to agencies, this is what's important to us. And you've seen this time and again as the SBA has suspended 8A firms, and they've done the audit of 8A contracting, and they're really trying to look at sole source contracting. And then obviously the push here to support veteran-owned small businesses. I think there's a lot of messages coming out here. But again, I'm going to go back to something that George Price, the former OSDBU director at State Department, told me. He goes, there are some winners, obviously, in this new methodology, veteran-owned firms, but he believes this is also going to hurt small businesses rather than really help them. He believes women-owned small firms, hubs-owned firms also could be at risk of losing opportunities. And, of course, there's no mention in the document about how small business offices, many of which have lost personnel over the last year because of the DRP and because of RIFs and other reasons, how are they going to continue to do outreach, training, help small businesses get invoices paid, reviewing consolidations and bundling proposals? They're really not really saying to a lot of agencies, hey, we're going to measure these things, but we're not going to tell you anything else about what to do and how to make sure all small businesses are successful. And I think that's part of this bigger concern.
That's Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller. Jason, thanks so much for this story.
My pleasure, Terry.
You can find all the details at federalnewsnetwork.com.